Part 30. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 291. You could hear a needle drop in the Tai Chi hall, and the silence was a bit eerie. Everyone looked in disbelief as if they had seen a ghost. Many people even sat down on the ground, including Lu Pingyang. Lu Pingyang was under the Wangjiang platform today and witnessed with his own eyes Su Buling's sword opened a hole as big as a fist in Song Ji's chest, shattering his heart and flesh and blood, and he died when he left the stage. The Emperor's eyeliner personally confirmed it. It is absolutely true that the dead cannot die again. My heart and lungs have been shattered, how can I still survive? All civil and military officials in the dynasty saw the scene of Song Ji's death, so they couldn't believe that the man in dragon robes sitting on the couch in front of them was Song Ji. But the aura and demeanor in your words are definitely not fake. They can't ask you why you're not dead? The courtiers did not dare to question, but some people dared to ask. Sitting on the dragon chair, Song Yu had an incomprehensible look in her eyes. She opened her mouth and said after a long while. You, how did you? How come I'm not dead? Song Ji was carried to the center of the Golden Palace and looked at his younger brother with a bit of disappointment. The world is not at peace, and I haven't reached the time of death yet. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! The civil and military officials in the court finally woke up and knelt on the ground one after another. Many ministers were crying, and more people were relieved. As long as Song Ji was still alive, everything could be restored and the world would not be in chaos. Above the Tai Chi hall, Song Yu, who had just been sitting on the dragon chair, suddenly stood up, with anger and unacceptable eyes in his eyes, and raised his hand to point to Song Ji, who was sitting on his lower hair. He's fake. He's fake. Brother Huang is dead. Come on, get this guy. Lu Pingyang collapsed on the ground, lost his mind, and seemed to have lost his mind. Hans Hongaya was already kneeling on the ground, shivering and not daring to say a word. Lu and Han, who brought their own soldiers into the imperial city to force the palace, were trembling while holding their swords, and they shouldn't even raise their heads. Hundreds of imperial guards lowered their heads and dropped the knives in their hands. Their faces were pale and they did not dare to make any move. In the 10 years since Song Ji took the throne, even though Tai Ying's hunting of deer was overcorrected, the original intention was good. The only nitpick in the past 10 years was probably that he was half a quarter of an hour late to court one time while playing chess. In addition, Song Ji was diligent in government, loved the people, appointed people on their merits, was ambitious and strategic, and was self-denial and devoted to public service. He was impeccable in all aspects. In the hearts of civil and military officials, Song Ji was a hero of his generation. Even Xiao Chuiang, Lu Chenggan, and others had to think twice before speaking in front of him. Song Ji had absolute dominance and appeal in both the government and the public. He gave an order to 7 vassal princes to send their sons to the capital, and no one dared to refuse. With such a monarch sitting in the Tai Chi palace, even if he is alone, who would dare to make a mistake? What's more, Eunuch Jia was standing next to Song Ji with his eyes half closed. Su Buletin can do it with 1,000, so why can't Eunuch Jia do it? To assassinate Song Ji, Song Yu tried every possible means to lure Eunuch Jia away from Song Ji, because no one in the world could get into Song Ji's body as long as Eunuch Jia was around. With Song Ji's appearance in the Tai Chi hall, the situation was over and there was no chance of a comeback. Lu Pingyang knew it, Hans Hongaya knew it, and Song Yu also knew it. However, Song Yu refused to accept it and refused to give in. The layout has been planned for 3 years, just for today. He is obviously dead, why does he appear here? Song Yu's handsome face was twisted. He stood in front of the dragon chair, pointed at Song Ji below, and roared hysterically. Why aren't you dead? You are obviously dead. You are obviously dead. As soon as the statement came out, the whole audience was shocked. The courtiers present were not fools. Song Yu had already felt something was wrong when he asked the Royal Forest Army to arrest people. After hearing this sentence, they immediately understood the meaning and were all in disbelief. Outside the main hall, Kui Huelu ran in with his official robe, but unfortunately he was old and could not outrun the Prime Minister Xiao Chuiang. Xiao Chuiang walked quickly and ran up to the officials. He raised his finger and pointed at Song Yu, yelling angrily. Song Yu, you are so brave, you dare to encourage Prince Su to commit regicide, do you know what crime you deserve? Kui Huelu ran forward panting and raised his hand. Yes, do you know what the crime is? The ministers were immediately upset. Song Ji was here. He didn't need anyone to remind him what to say. They were all excited and asked Song Yu what was going on. Song Yu's face turned pale in an instant. The words had already been spoken, and it was too late to explain. Brother Emperor, I. Song Yu, who was wearing a scholar's robe, was trembling slightly, but he concentrated hard, trying to find an excuse to cover up what he just said. After all, there is no evidence. Even if the incident fails, the responsibility can still be placed on Su Buling. He just lost his composure because of the emperor's brother's death. But before Song Yu could think of words, Song Ji, who was surrounded by the ministers, sighed softly. Song Yu, I am your brother. I have always regarded you as my own brother. I have always been on guard against you. I never thought that I would encounter a fratricide. The most ruthless emperor's family, but the father, the emperor, and the empress passed away. I only have you as my biological brother. Why didn't you tell me if you wanted the throne? Your Majesty. All the officials were frightened and persuaded Song Ji to calm down. Song Yu stood in front of the dragon chair. At this time, the situation was over and he could only grit his teeth and argue. My brother has no intention of usurping the throne. It's them. They asked me to come over and take charge of the overall situation. No one believed the weak sophistry. Perhaps in order to make his brother give up, Song Ji raised his hand, and the dead soldier Yi, who was injured in the chest, walked into the Tai Chi hall with a bruised man and threw him into the golden hall. Thump! The figure fell to the ground and let out a weak groan. No part of his body was intact, his hair was disheveled and covered in blood, and the muscles and bones of his hands and feet were turned out, still dripping with blood. Song Yu's eyes narrowed, and even though the visitor had lost sight of his face, from the figure and the hum, he recognized that this man who had been tortured was Lu Yunlin, his trusted aide in the Criminal Investigation Department. Song Yu's whole body shook violently, then trembled slightly and was speechless. The ministers were still asking what was going on, and many people looked at the deputy envoy of the detective department on the ground. Song Ji turned his head and glanced at Lu Yunlin on the ground, and said in a calm voice, "Explain this matter to all my dear friends." Lu Yunlin, who could no longer stand up, did not know how much torture he had suffered. There was only an urgency to die in his eyes. He squirmed on the smooth floor of the Golden Palace and spoke tremblingly. 5 years ago, Lieutenant Lu introduced me to the King of Yan. The King of Yan made a heavy promise to me to be used by him. 3 summers ago, when I learned that the 7th prince's son had come to Beijing to study, King Yan conspired with Lu Taiwei and Hans Hongao to make a plan. After that, the secret guard bribed by King Yan, the Holy Death Scholar, stole the dragon locking goo from the inner treasury. At this point, even the courtiers who were frightened out of their wits showed some doubts and looked at Song Ji. Kui Huelu took a step forward and was about to explain, when Xiao Chuiang spoke again. The locking dragon Gu Jiazi was searched by the Xiao family and was lent to the Kui family to kill Zhu Silk Mountain. It was later stolen and found by the secret guard and sent to Chang'an. Store it properly. Kui Huelu opened his mouth and answered. Indeed. Begwan suddenly realized and looked at Lu Yunlin again. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 292. After Lu and Han obtained the dragon locking goo, they sent their own assassins to ambush Prince Su on the banks of the Wei River, killing all his followers and guards, and planted the dragon locking goo, secretly chasing and intercepting Prince Su to Chang'an City. Afterwards, I prepared a wolf guard corpse at the heroic tomb, and tampered with the case files in the case library, waiting for Prince Su to be poisoned. Last winter, Prince Su had been poisoned for more than a year. Prince Yan felt that the time was right, so he spread the news to Prince Su's guards, led Prince Su to the case library, and contacted Empress Kui's assassin Jia Yi. Prince Su cultivated a wolf guard confidant, that is, to break the Zhu Manzi, who was involved in the Beimazhuang and salt smuggling cases, was supported to join the Tianzi camp. I sent Zhu Manzi to look for old case files on the pretext of looking for them. Prince Su found clues about the dragon locking goo and Jia Yi in the case file library, and then dug up the tomb of the wolf guards, confirmed that it was consistent with the goo poison on his body, and sneaked into the palace to find Jia Yi to verify. Because there was no evidence, Jia Yi used his life to make Prince Su believe that the dragon locking goo was indeed in the inner library, and the murderer was the current emperor. Wow! The court officials suddenly became noisy, and finally understood why Prince Su, who had always been low-key, did those messy things last year. That's it? Then, how did you drive Prince Su crazy and make him recklessly commit crimes against the emperor? Lu Yunlin was almost out of breath, lying on the ground, and continued. After Prince Su determined that the murderer was the current emperor, because the dragon locking goo likes cold and fears heat, it is especially vicious in summer, and the pain of thousands of ants gnawing at the heart will affect people's mind and become crazy and irritable. The king of Yan decided to take action in the summer. Originally, the arrangements had been almost made, but Prince Su was too impulsive. He fought hard with the northern Qi envoy in front of the Taiji Hall, making himself bedridden, and all the arrangements were almost in vain. Fortunately, Prince Su was in good health and recovered quickly. The Prince of Yan was afraid of something going wrong and dared not delay any longer, so he asked Cao Mang, who had just arrived in Beijing, to test him. However, the Prince of Su was well guarded and failed. Later, Lu Pingyang and Hans Hongaiu instigated the young men in Chang'an to challenge him. The Prince of Su accepted the challenge and then confirmed that the Prince of Su had recovered. In order to confirm the situation of the Prince of Su's dragon locking goo, at the end of April, Lu Taiwei sent a death warrior to shoot Ning Yuhi with an arrow. The Prince of Su was furious and vomited blood on the spot. The time had come, and Lu Pingyang went to the palace to meet the emperor and suggested holding a martial arts competition to select the champion, and the competition was held on the Wangjiang Terrace outside the city. For in order to completely anger the Prince of Su, on May 1st, I led a hunter from Chenkang to the Prince of Su's guards. During the ambush on the Wei River, Lu Taiwei sent another pair of people to deliberately pass by the hunter's hiding place, stepped on the trap and stopped, and talked for a few words, saying that the emperor sent them to assassinate the Prince of Su, and kill them without mercy. The hunter was real, and the Prince of Su must believe that the emperor wanted to kill him, but this did not make the Prince of Su take risks. The Prince of Su's mother died of illness, and after entering the capital, he regarded Madame Lu as a close relative, and everyone in Chang'an knew it. On May 8, the Prince of Su and Madame Lu went to Wangjiang Terrace together. The King of Yan sent the Emperor's death squad to ambush on the road. On the surface, they wanted to assassinate the Prince of Su, but in fact, they were targeting Madame Lu. The Prince of Su was eager to save people, and he saved Madame Lu regardless of anything. Although he saved Madame Lu, the dragon locking goo was difficult to suppress. In addition, the weather was hot, and he went crazy on the spot due to his anger, and rushed to Wangjiang Terrace. At this point, the whole audience was noisy, with people being stunned, relieved, and shocked. Everything Su Buling had done since leaving Qinzhou until today seemed to be connected to one thing. From the son of a general who was full of loyal and brave people and never forgot the grace of the country, just stepped out of the fiefdom. He fell into the deadly trap set by Song Yu and others, step by step, lured him into the trap, and pointed the spearhead at the emperor on the dragon throne. Put yourself in their shoes and imagine that you could have a promising future with martial arts, but you were poisoned by the dragon-locking goo and suffered from the pain of thousands of ants gnawing at your heart day and night. He was loyal to Daio for 3 generations and did not make any mistakes, but he found that the murderer was the emperor he sacrificed his life for. When he was exhausted and had no way out, even his relatives were affected. Being forced to this point, Prince Su, it would be strange if the prince is not crazy. However, even at this time, Prince Su still had no intention of rebelling against the Song family. He stood at the Wangjiang terrace with no other choice but to say that the emperor is unjust and wanted to replace Daio with a wise ruler at the cost of the lives of the entire Su family. If Song Ji is really the kind of person who will do anything to kill meritorious people, then he should be replaced. There are more meritorious families in the Daio court than just Su Lai, and most court officials understand the principle of lips and teeth are cold. Thinking of this, the officials suddenly understood what Su Buling did at Wangjiang Terrace. He is just a poor man used by traitors. The crime is not on the Prince of Su. Fortunately, Song Ji is alive and well, and has not made a big mistake, otherwise there would be no way to end it. As Lu Yunlin finished explaining the whole story, the Taiji Hall quieted down, and looked up at Song Yu, Lu, and Han in front of the dragon throne, their eyes full of anger. Song Yu has always been called a contemporary true gentleman, but I didn't expect that he would do such a crazy thing in order to usurp the throne. It doesn't matter if brothers kill each other and kill the king, forcing the loyal Su family to rebel and dragging the whole world into war. What kind of heart is this? Song Ji shook his head and sighed, looking at his brother. Song Yu, I have the most trust in you. If it weren't for the assassination of Wang Jiangtai and Lu Yunlin's transfer of Laoxia, I would never have thought that you would set up such a big scheme to plot against me and Daio's pillars of the country. You are really, alas. He was heartbroken and speechless. Song Yu was trembling all over. His bottom line had been revealed. He had no strength to refute it because he had done these things. I can't help it. After a moment of silence, Song Yu suddenly roared hysterically, his eyes bloodshot, looking at his brother and the civil and military officials in the court. Back then, I gave up the throne and gave it to you because I treated you as my elder brother, as my own brother. But you? I should have been a vassal in Yuzhu, and I had correspondence with the eldest daughter of the Kui family. When you chose the queen, I advised you many times to choose someone else and keep Miss Kui. I promised Kui Zioan that she would not enter the palace to be the queen. But I finally broke my promise because you, because of the Kui family, betrayed my words and ignored them. You were unjust first, so how can you blame me for being unkind? You are the emperor, I can't help it, I can't bear it. But you took Kui Zioan into the palace, and she died of worry after just a few years. You didn't take her or me seriously at all. Do you think I'm greedy for this throne? I didn't care about this emperor from beginning to end. I just want revenge, I just want to kill you. I just want to teach you and the Kui family a lesson, let you pay with blood. The roar shook the golden palace. Song Yu roared like a madman, looking for the last excuse and fig leaf for himself to be trapped by love. The officials were excited and scolded and cursed. Song Ji sat in the center of the golden palace, looking at his brother who was still quibbling, with deep disappointment in his eyes, thought for a while, and raised his hand. Jia Gong leaned over to support Song Ji's arm, stood up and walked to the top of the golden palace. Tap tap tap. The slight footsteps instantly suppressed the noise in the Taiji palace. Song Yu stopped talking, his eyes were red, he gritted his teeth and looked at his brother who was walking over, but he was not afraid. What if you kill me? At least in the afterlife, I have done my duty to Xiaowan, which is better than you who are so heartless and disloyal? Song Yu. Song Ji walked slowly to the Tai Chi, came to the side of the dragon throne, looked at his brother, was silent for a moment, leaned close to Song Yu's ear, and whispered something. After saying this, Song Yu's body shook violently, with disbelief and surprise in his eyes, and he took a few steps back. Impossible, impossible, you. Song Ji frowned and looked at his brother who had lost his soul, and gently raised his hand. I have always regarded you as my brother, but if you go by yourself, I will not interfere. This is your own choice, I hope you can do it yourself. Song Yu's eyes were as big as copper bells, and his whole body was shaking uncontrollably. His face changed from indignation just now to astonishment and embarrassment. After taking a few steps back, he fell to the ground, kept shrinking back, and trembling. Impossible. Impossible. How could you? Impossible. Impossible. The hoarse and hysterical roar reached everyone's ears. The court officials naturally did not dare to ask what Song Ji said, but seeing the shame and embarrassment on Song Yu's face, they knew that it must be a rebuttal of all Song Yu's fig leaves, making him feel ashamed and unable to face it, so he would do so. Song Ji sat down on the dragon chair again, sighed softly, and raised his hands slightly. After all, we are brothers from the same mother. You can kill each other, but I can't do such a thing. Send the Prince of Yan back to the Imperial College, build a high wall, and never let him take a single step out of it for the rest of his life. Your Majesty is wise. The court officials bowed hurriedly and asked the confused Imperial guards to drag the mad Song Yu away. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 293. After all the demons were dancing, it was already midnight. The imperial city was brightly lit, and the majestic Taiji Hall was quiet again, restoring the solemnity and dignity of the past court sessions. After all, at this moment, there was a backbone that could be relied on. Song Ji sat on the dragon chair, scanning the ministers with different expressions, and finally stopped his gaze on Lu Pingyang and Hans Hongaiu, who were kneeling on the ground and trembling. His voice was majestic and angry. Instigating the king of Yan to usurp the throne, tricking the prince of Su to kill the king, and almost dragging the whole world into the quagmire, it can be said that the crime is extremely heinous and the 9 clans should be executed. Come, take off the official robes of these 2 thieves and send their heads to the 9 borders to serve as a warning to others. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Your Majesty, calm down. Lu Pingyang and Hans Hongaiu, the Grand Marshal, trembled immediately, crawled forward on their knees, but didn't know how to defend themselves. The civil and military officials in the court watched coldly, even their former colleagues and old friends, with anger and hatred in their eyes at this time. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of footsteps continued, the inner guards rushed in, dragged the 2 wailing military officers out, and the wolf guards and the imperial guards rushed into the gates of the Lu and Han families at almost the same time. As the matter of usurpation was settled, Song Ji took charge of the overall situation again, and the civil and military officials in the court secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and at this time they remembered the Suwang who had left Qinzhou and headed for Chang'an. Since the Suwang had led a large army out of Qinzhou, it must be a rebellion. Although Su Buling was deceived, once the banner of rebellion was raised, there was no turning back, and the matter was still very tricky. We can't just let the Suwang's rebellion go just because it was a misunderstanding. There will be a second time if there is a first time. If the Suwang is still in charge of Ziliang, the emperor will be at ease, and the court officials will not be at ease. The officials were silent for a moment, and Kui Huilu, the imperial censor, stepped forward and was about to speak. Xiao Chuang was the first to stand up and interrupted him. Your Majesty, Prince Su has already led a large army out of Qinzhou. His wolfish ambitions are obvious. Please quickly summon the 6 princes to the capital to help the king and quell Prince Su's rebellion. Kui Huelu took a deep breath and stepped forward. I second the motion. The rest of the officials naturally seconded the motion and waited for the emperor to make instructions. Song Ji sat on the dragon chair with a sad face. After a moment of silence, Prince Yan and Lu Enhan conspired to deceive Prince Su's son. The prince was young and had no way out after being poisoned. Although they made a big mistake, it was not their own intention. He sacrificed his life for the country in front of Taiji Palace, and I saw it. Therefore, I don't blame Su Buling, and I shouldn't blame him. Huh. The civil and military officials in the court breathed a sigh of relief. With the emperor's words, Su Buling didn't have to be killed. As long as Su Buling was not killed, there would be room for negotiation. Xiao Chuang raised his hand again and said loudly, "The Prince of Su has led his troops out of Qinzhou. Even if there is a reason, he must be punished." Kui Huelu frowned and looked unhappy because he had been robbed all day. His Kui family and Song Ji had been planning for so many years just to get rid of the warlord families of Lu and Han today, to give the Prince of Su a hard blow, and to cut off the Xiao, Lu, and other powerful families. According to the original plan of the Kui family, after Song Ji's death, the Prince of Su rebelled. Only Song Yu could preside over the overall situation in Chang'an. All officials were clear-sighted people, and they would not choose the young prince but support Song Yu. At that time, Xiao Chuang and Lu Pingyang would naturally take the lead. As long as his Kui family tried their best to protect the prince, when Song Ji was resurrected, the Xiao family would be finished on the spot. But Xiao Chuang's performance today, first commanding all officials and commanding the 6 kings, not giving an inch to destroy the Su family and boost national prestige, and then loyally protecting Song Ji's prince, risking the extermination of his family and not allowing Song Yu to take the throne, is exactly like the attitude of a minister entrusted with the care of an orphan. These things should have been done by Kui Huelu, but they were all taken away by Xiao Chuang. But Xiao Chuang was the prime minister of the dynasty, with great prestige, so it is not surprising that he has this courage and skill. Kui Huelu hesitated for a moment, and could only nod. I second the motion. Xiao Chuang's performance in the national crisis was naturally seen in the dark by the Emperor Songji, and he was naturally relieved and even a little moved at this moment. After all, if Songji really died today, without Xiao Chuang and Kui Huelu's protection of the prince, Song Yu would definitely take the throne, and his line would die out. As long as Xiao Chuang and Kui Huelu did not give in, Song Yu would not be able to become the emperor, and sitting on the dragon throne would be a bare commander, unable to command the ministers. Song Ji originally wanted to change the prime minister, but after seeing Xiao Chuang's performance today, he would not change the prime minister even if he was asked to do so. Having such a loyal and strong-armed prime minister standing in the court to preside over the overall situation is better than supporting a puppet prime minister who changes his mind with the wind. No matter how influential the Huainan Xiao family is, it is not as threatening as the Su Wangsu family who holds a large number of troops. Trust the people you employ. Song Ji glanced at Xiao Chuang and raised his hand gently. Today, Xiao and Kui, the 2 beloved ministers, have suffered. Xiao Chuang received instructions from his sister Xiao Qi, so he naturally looked serious at this time, and bowed and said, "Your Majesty, please quickly decide how to deal with Prince Su. When the Western Liang army arrives at Jianyang Pass to meet the enemy, it will be too late for Guo Zongxian's troops to intercept." Song Ji looked at the civil and military officials in the court, was silent for a moment, and sighed. The Su family is full of loyal and brave people. General Su opened up this vast land for Daewoo. Emperor Xiaozong once said, "Share the wealth and honor of the Su family for eternity." I have always kept it in mind. The people of the world still remember the glory of General Su's battles. Now that the world is not at peace, Prince Su's lineage has always been my right-hand man. And Su Wang Suyu, when we were in the capital, we were brothers, we studied together and drank together. Although we haven't seen each other for 20 years, I still regard him as my brother, and I have always trusted him and have not been wary of him at all. Su Buletinling's innocent heart is a lesson to the world. He was deceived by King Yan. It was my fault. I failed to teach my younger brother well and manage my ministers well. I don't blame Su Buletinling, let alone King Su. The Holy One is wise. The ministers quickly seconded the proposal. Xiao Chuang spoke again at this time. Su Buling had a reason for what happened. He was deceived by King Yan. It was a wise move for the Holy Lord to magnanimously forgive Su Buling. But King Su had already led his troops out of Qinzhou towards Chang'an. This move it is no different than rebellion and must not be punished. I second the proposal. All civil and military officials in the dynasty bowed, which was in line with Xiao Chuang's words. Songji raised his hand and rubbed his forehead, showing a bit of unbearability. Prince Su and I are brothers and sisters. They have always been impulsive. There must be no objection in their hearts. It is only because they are eager to save their son that they take this step. Su Buling was framed by the gangsters and has been seriously injured. I am sorry for their father and son. Su Buling sent him back to Suzhou and asked him to retreat. Your Majesty, no. Your Majesty. When the courtiers saw that Songji was so magnanimous and sensible, they became a little anxious. Su Buling's regicide was justified and could be forgiven, but King Su rebelled in order to save his son, so how could he let things go by the wayside? A vassal king with a heavy army, because his son killed the emperor, rebelled with his troops to save his son. If this is the case, how can other vassal kings still do it if they learn from it? However, it is impossible to kill the entire Su family. King Su has already rebelled, so there is no way to kill the entire Su family, but it certainly cannot be left to that. Now I have to think of a compromise punishment, which will not only allow King Su to accept the honest withdrawal of troops and return to the fiefdom, but also keep the court's face. Kui Huelu reacted quickly this time. Before Xiao Chuang could think of a punishment method, he quickly stepped forward and revealed the plan that had been brewing for many years. In my opinion, it is true that King Su was eager to save his son, but it is also true that he sent a large army out of Qinzhou and headed towards Chang'an. If there is no punishment, it will be difficult to appease the hearts of all the officials and the people of the world. However, the Su family is full of loyalties. Your Majesty, we can cut off the two states of Qin and Wei, and let King Su shrink his jurisdiction to the Lanzhou area for some punishment. Then, sending Prince Su's crown prince back to Suzhou will also show the magnanimity of the Holy Majesty, and King Su will be grateful. Songji couldn't bear it. He hesitated for a long time, and then he let out a long sigh as if he was killing Ma Su with tears. That's all, I'll fix a letter and send it to Prince Su. The Holy One is wise. Kui Huelu bowed quickly, turned around and signaled to the eunuch waiting at the side of the hall to rush the news to Chenkang, which is 800 miles away, to avoid a real fight that would end badly. The officials also breathed a sigh of relief. This punishment was just right. They sent their son back to keep his title. It was obvious that King Su would not die together again, so he accepted it as soon as possible. And the imperial court can also get back the Qin and Wei states that it has been thinking about for 60 years. Thinking of this, many officials were shocked and suddenly came to their senses, a little unbelievable. After much thinking about what happened this time, the biggest winner was the Holy Lord who was stabbed. Daio's general family will probably be severely suppressed after this usurpation of the throne. The two largest families in the general family, Lu and Han, were uprooted, leaving many positions for poor generals. This seems to be what Songji has always wanted to do since he succeeded to the throne. What you do? Qianyang Pass is 300 miles away from Chang'an, and Qinzhou is 600 miles away from Chang'an. They have always been a thorn in the side of the imperial court. Now that Jianyang Pass and the Qin and Wei states are back, the border of King Su's fiefdom is at Lanzhou, which is 1,000 miles away from Chang'an. There are 8 dangerous passes in it. There is no need to worry about the Su family breaking through Chang'an in 10 days. This calculation. After the officials reacted, they were all shocked beyond measure. Song Ji seemed to have done nothing from the beginning to the end, but at the end, he took advantage of all the benefits, and also gained the great prestige of the wise king. By the way, he also cut off the generals and King Su's lineage. If it weren't for Xiao Chuang performed well, but he might have to get stabbed. Although the ministers could not believe that the emperor above was behind the scenes, it was often said that whoever profited the most would be the mastermind behind the scenes. After all this trouble, Song Ji directly cleaned the court and eliminated all potential threats left by Emperor Xiaozong. Such a justified and drastic move would make even a fool believe that Song Ji did not know anything about it. But it was Song Yu who usurped the throne, and Su Buling, the rebellious King Su, who killed the emperor. Song Ji seemed to have done nothing from beginning to end. Wrong. The courtier suddenly remembered Song Ji, who didn't speak much from the beginning to the end on Wangjiang platform, and was finally stabbed through the heart by a sword. Song Ji, who was wearing a dragon robe, was definitely dead and could not be revived. Although Song Ji, who was sitting on the dragon chair now, looked pale, he didn't look like he had a hole in his chest. That's a stand-in. What a kill 2 men with 1 peach. Song Ji really didn't do anything, he just watched with cold eyes. After Song Yu landed the key piece, Song Ji just sent a substitute for Song Yu to kill, and then blew up Song Yu, Lu, Han, and King Su. Later, he appeared to stabilize the chaos, wiped out Lu Han and Song Yu, and cut off some of King Su's fiefdoms. Not only was it justifiable, but it also made people feel benevolent. It was impossible to say that King Su had to shed tears of gratitude. This wrist. All the ministers bowed their hands and listened to the sound of footsteps disappearing into the golden palace, with indescribable shock and fear in their eyes. How can a minister not be afraid of a monarch who is so tyrannical in his mind? The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 294. Tiger. 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 300 miles away, beneath the mountains, a deafening cry echoed through the city. The wilderness outside the mountains is littered with corpses. Ownerless horses are walking aimlessly on the muddy ground full of body parts. The black-armored sergeant holding a bow and arrow in his hand pulls out the arrow from the corpse, picks up the handle of the knife, and throws it to the ground. On the car, when he met the defeated general who was still wailing, he stabbed him with a knife. There were piles of corpses under the majestic pass city wall, and arrows like crossbow shafts were inserted into the city wall. Some people were nailed directly to the city wall by crossbow arrows. Long ladders and siege vehicles were piled all over the ground, and many were fired upon. The oil ignited and emitted black smoke. The Ziliang army, who had been fighting all night, searched for wine and meat in the small town behind the pass. They also caught the enemy deserters hiding everywhere, dragged them to the bottom of the pass, chopped off their heads, and killed them right in front of the pass. Jingguan. More than 10,000 heads were piled up in Jingguan, which was 10 feet high. The Ziliang army in black armor would carry a few bloody heads from time to time, step on the countless heads, and put the heads on the top. Under the morning light, the earth turned into a sea of blood, and the pungent smell of blood could be smelled more than 10 miles away. The flag above the pass was cut off and replaced with King Su's black royal flag. The white-haired man in a python robe sat alone on the top of the city gate tower, holding a tea-green wine gourd in his hand, looking at the newly piled Beijing Tower in front of him, his eyes as calm as ever. Your Majesty, there is a letter from the capital. Downstairs of the city gate, military advisor Yu Julu flew up to the roof, stood next to Su Yu, handed him the paper tube containing the imperial edict, and at the same time looked at the mountains behind. "My lord, did we fight too fast? I thought it would take at least 3 days to break through, but I didn't expect that we broke through in one night. There don't seem to be many defenders. It's good that no one is good. Let Tu and Chu continue to fight until there is someone." Suyu put down the wine gourd, opened the paper tube that had just been rushed from 800 miles away, glanced at it, and nodded gently. "The Holy Lord regards this king as a brother. The crime of regicide is not yours. Cut off the 2 states of Qin and Wei." Suyu stood up and carefully looked at the imperial edict that had just been sent. "Your calculation is really accurate. Your Majesty really wants to cut off my vassal, so it's just right to strike with no more or less. If I want to counterattack, I will be unable to speak out." Yujulu walked up to him and glanced at the imperial edict. The current Holy One is by no means a mediocre person. He is really ruthless in his ability to push the boat along with the flow and take advantage of the situation. It's a shame that I still regarded him as my brother back then, but... Suwang Suyu cursed secretly, jumped off the city gate tower, turned his head and glanced at the Jingquan outside the city, then entered the handsome tent in the city gate tower, spread out the paper on the desk, and pondered for a while. "Lao Yu, if you write like this, will your Majesty kill your child with a knife?" Yujulu stood in front of him and thought about it carefully. "It's just right to chop it down. The prince has a reputation as a master, and he will be able to conquer the world again." Suyu took up the pen and thought about it for a while, then began to write down line after line on the rice paper. In the blink of an eye, it was already 3 days later. From Chenkang to Chang'an, the 200,000 U Western Army passed through 3 passes in 300 miles, and almost no one could sleep a wink. Guo Zhongxian stood on the top of Zhenhu Pass day and night, waiting for Qianyang Pass to reopen and the Ziliang cavalry to rush over like a tide. Many scouts were also sent across Qianyang Pass to check King Su's marching movements. Unfortunately, after passing Qianyang Pass, it was basically King Su's base. The scouts never returned, and they could not detect where they went. They could only guarding tightly day and night, waiting for the day when the Ziliang cavalry will meet the enemy. But inside Chang'an City, there was still deathly silence. Su Buletinling was taken out of the prison and placed in a house near the imperial city for treatment. Because Su Buletinling had taken poison that blocked qi and blood beforehand, and the locking dragon goo was still there, he was currently lying on the bed dying. Play dead. The royal guards acted vigorously and ransacked the houses of the Lu and Han families, beheaded Lu Pingyang and Hans Hongaiu, and purged all the military attaches in the government and the public. All those involved in the usurpation of the throne were beheaded, and their blood almost flowed into rivers. This was originally a major event that shocked the ruling and opposition parties, but at this time, the ruling and opposition parties were so shocked that they did not dare to care about the life and death of the 2 general families. They all looked northwest intently, fearing that Guo Zhongxian would collapse at the first touch, and King Su's royal flag suddenly appeared outside Chang'an City. Even Song Ji sat in the Tai Chi Hall every day waiting for King Su's reply. Although he expected that King Su would retreat and not die together, he was still a little panicked before receiving the exact news. It was in this atmosphere where everyone was restless that something happened at the summer resort outside the city. The Queen Mother, who was resting in the summer resort, learned about the fratricide between brothers Songyu and Songji. She was sad and angry. She felt that she had failed to educate her children well and was ashamed of the late emperor. After leaving her last words, she committed suicide in the summer resort directly with a torch to escape the summer heat. The villa was burned down. This should have been a big event, but at this critical moment, the court officials and Songji didn't even have time to remember it, so they just arranged for the eunuchs and people from the Xiao family to handle it. As for the Queen Mother's sudden suicide, it actually makes sense if you think about it carefully. The killing of brothers in the imperial family is a scandal that will last forever. As the legitimate mother of the 2, the Queen Mother has the responsibility to discipline them. She has suffered from loneliness in the palace for many years. For this reason, she cannot figure out that committing suicide to apologize can be regarded as a righteous act. The Queen Mother was not very old and had no sense of presence. The impact at this time was not as big as the impact of Lu and Han's homes being confiscated. She was basically forgotten the next day. Everyone was waiting for news from the northwest. Battle report. It's a pity that the scouts risked their lives to pass through Qianyang Pass and got news that Prince Su was marching towards Qianyang Pass at a moderate speed, cutting down trees and building siege equipment along the way, obviously preparing to attack the city. And because Qianyang Pass, the first pass in the northwest, was in the hands of Prince Su, the court was very passive. It couldn't break through Qianyang Pass by going out of the pass to suppress the rebellion. It couldn't let Prince Su open Qianyang Pass by himself and let Guo Zhongxian lead the army to stop Prince Su. And even if Qianyang Pass was broken, it couldn't beat the Su family army, which was famous for its cavalry, on the plains. Going out was a death wish. They could only dig trenches, build bunkers and check for leaks in Zhenhu Pass, waiting for Prince Su to come and attack the city. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Finally, on the third day after the Taiji Palace coup, a flying horse passed through the palace gate directly, holding a paper tube in his hand and a yellow flag behind him, and ran directly to the Taiji Hall. Song Ji stood up from the dragon chair with his fists clenched. The civil and military officials who had not slept for 3 days and 3 nights suddenly became agitated and looked at the servants who came to deliver the message. Waiting for the war report that was related to Daio's national destiny. At this moment, there were only 3 possibilities for the news that could be sent back from the northwest. One was that Su Wangsuyu accepted the punishment, withdrew his troops and ceded the land of Qin and Wei states, solving the major worry of the court for 60 years. All officials naturally looked forward to this good news, and drove Su Wang completely to the barren land of the northwest, so that they would not have to worry about Su Wang's rebellion in the future. This was also the most likely news. Second, Su Wangsuyu did not accept the punishment, broke through Zhenhu Pass and continued to come to Chang'an. This was bad news. If Zhenhu Pass was broken in 3 days, it would inevitably collapse without a fight. The king of Shu and the king of Chu had not arrived yet, and I was afraid that they really had to prepare to defend Chang'an to the death and wait for rescue. This would only be possible if the 6 kings did not have an idea and watched the fire from the other side of the river. The last possibility is that the veteran general Guo Zhongxian showed his prowess, led his troops to destroy the Ziliang army, and killed the Su Wangsuyu. This possibility is the same as no possibility. The civil and military officials would rather believe that Guo Zhongxian surrendered than believe that Guo Zhongxian killed the Su Wang. If the Su family was so easy to destroy, the emperor would not have to go to great lengths to plan for years to deal with it. Tap tap tap. Soon, the messenger who reported the news ran up the imperial road and rushed into the Taiji palace. The ministers hurried forward and urged. How is the battle going? Is the Su family rebelling or surrendering? Can Zhenhu Pass be defended? The noise drowned the Taiji palace. The messenger held up the paper tube and rushed to the golden palace, kneeling on one knee. In the anxious eyes of the civil and military officials, he said loudly. Jingyuan is a great victory. Jingyuan is a great victory. Jingyuan is a great victory. The ministers. Songji. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 295. Great victory in Jingyuan. Great victory in Jingyuan. Great victory in Jingyuan. The battle report of the frontier army's victory echoed in the Golden Palace. It should have been a historic moment for the whole country to celebrate, but at this time, all the civil and military officials looked at the emissary with blank eyes, wondering if they had called it wrong. We are all waiting for news from King Su. What are you calling the great victory of Jingyuan? Jingyuan is from the northern Qi dynasty, What does it have to do with King Su? Even Song Ji looked confused. He didn't understand why he was waiting for such news at this time. Among the officials, only Xiao Chuang showed a somewhat relieved look. When all the officials were at a loss, he asked, "Say, what happened to Jing Yuan?" The messenger knelt down on one knee holding the paper tube, with a bit of excitement on his face, and said loudly, "On the night of May 11th, King Su led a cavalry force of 40,000 to raid the Wangnan Pass of the northern Qi dynasty at night. He changed his cavalry to attack the city on foot. In just one night, he broke through Wangnan Pass, the gate of the northern Qi dynasty. He captured the enemy generals alive and killed more than 10,000 enemies. Yuan Zhou's troops are empty. General Tu Qianchu has led 30,000 troops to attack Yuanzhou city. I am afraid that he has already reached the city. What a great victory!" The hurried words were spoken in an instant, saliva flew everywhere, and it was difficult to get excited. The ministers were immediately in an uproar, and only then did they understand what the Jingyuan victory meant. However, the courtiers were not excited by the report of the expansion of territory, but they all looked puzzled and a little unbelievable. Kui Huailu, who had been working with the emperor for many years, was the first to jump out and said angrily, "Nonsense, how could Su Yu lead troops to attack Baiki? You." At this point, the words stopped abruptly. All the civil and military officials also immediately stopped talking, feeling something was wrong. What Kui Huailu said was bullshit. King Su was guarding the northwest and was in full contact with Prince Zhou of northern Qi. He was originally at war with northern Qi. How could Su Yu lead troops to fight against northern Qi? Xiao Chuang frowned and looked at Kui Huailu. Where does Mr. Kui think King Su should lead his troops? Kui Huailu held a mouthful of old blood in his chest and glared at Xiao Chuang, who had added insult to injury, but was speechless. Everyone has been waiting in Chang'an City for 3 days. What are you waiting for? Wait for King Su to lead his troops to attack Chang'an or retreat. Prince Su's sons have all killed the emperor, and they will soon behead everyone. He will lead an army of 80,000 out of Qinzhou. If not heading towards Chang'an, where else can he go? Even if Su Yu is a fool, it is impossible for him to still think about attacking Baiki at this time. What is he trying to do? All civil and military officials knew these words, but the news from the front line had already spread. King Su led troops to fight against northern Qi, which meant that there was no rebellion. Since there was no rebellion, he could not slander King Su for rebelling in the court. Even if they don't even want a son, they will kill everyone in their family when they come back, and they still want to go and fight against Baiki. What can you do to me? All the civil and military officials, princes, generals, and ministers were all puzzled and could not figure out the whole story. Thousands of miles away, the Black City between the Yellow Sands was far more desolate than the Dayu court. Zhang Nu, the left prince of the northern Qi dynasty, overturned the table between the handsome tents. He looked at the group of counselors standing there with a livid face, gritted his teeth and cursed angrily. What the hell is going on? Why did Su Yu attack Yuanzhou? His son even killed the emperor. He led an army of 80,000 people out of Qinzhou instead of going to Chang'an, and took a detour to attack me? Did I offend him? Kill his son, is he sick? Angry curses resounded through the handsome tent, and there was a mess outside. Chen Xian's face turned pale and he knelt on the ground sweating profusely. Your Majesty, please calm down. Now is not the time to get angry. King Su led an army of 80,000 people and took the road from Qingshui to Wangnangguan. Half of the troops and horses on the south side were deployed to attack Shazhu. The defenders of Wangnangguan watched the fire from across the bank and were unprepared. They were defeated by heavy troops overnight. Pass, if we don't send troops back to rush for reinforcements, once Yuanzhou is defeated, we will reach the Mobai plain, and Su Yu can directly attack the capital of northern Qi. Damn you! Zhang Nu raised his hand and slapped Chen Xian on the face, and cursed angrily. You asked me to go all out to attack Shazhu, and so you went to attack my Yuanzhou. Now we are more than 600 miles away, how can we go back to help? Chen Xian's mouth oozed blood, he knelt on the ground and said urgently. We must turn back and rush for reinforcements. If Shazhu is defeated, Suyu will lose the western region at most. If Yuanzhou is defeated, our Daki may be gone. We can't afford to replace it, and Yuanzhou cannot be lost. Zhang Nu was almost furious and pointed at Chen Xian. Wangnan Pass has been guarded for 60 years without being broken. Sulai was not even defeated. It was broken by a fool like you. You. In anger, Zhang Nu wanted to draw his knife. Many counselors rushed to stop him and asked Zhang Nu to withdraw his troops and return to defense. They had to save Yuanzhou before punishing him. Zhang Nu had no choice but to throw the knife on the ground. Withdraw troops and return to defense quickly. Hurry, hurry, hurry. At this time, in Chang'an, in the Golden Palace of the Imperial City, the civil and military officials finally came to their senses. Song Ji looked in disbelief and took a step forward. Wangnang Pass was broken? The army has already occupied Wangnang Pass. The messenger looked excited and held the paper tube high. It's absolutely true. After General Guo Zhongxian noticed something strange at Wangnang Pass, he personally led his troops to support him. There were crowds of people outside the pass, and the flags of King Su were planted. He ordered General Guo Zhongxian to rush back to Beijing to report. It's absolutely true. It's broken. Wow. Only then did the civil and military officials of the court come to their senses. Many ministers gradually became excited and even forgot about what happened just now, shouting great victory, great victory. Kui Huelu and other 3 princes and 9 ministers all looked surprised and suspicious. If the post-envoy hadn't been so sure, they all thought it was King Su who had sent the tiger away from the mountain. The importance of Yuanzhou is self-evident. It is the last springboard of northern Qi in the northwest and the national gate of northern Qi. Once Yuanzhou is broken, there will be no defense in the Mobei grassland. If Yuanzhou is not broken, northern Qi can march out of the pass at any time, take Ziliang in the upper part and attack Guanzhong in the lower part, and can advance and retreat freely. This place of strategic importance was not conquered before the founding of the country, and it is also the only state that Dayu has not recovered. The defense line of Yuanzhou has always been under the charge of Guo Zhongxian, while the defense line of Prince Su is in Suzhou and Shazhu, one in the east and the other in the west. However, it is no problem for Prince Su to attack Yuanzhou. If it were an ordinary day, Prince Suyu suddenly went crazy and broke Wangnan Pass, it would definitely be a scene of national celebration, because as long as Yuanzhou was conquered, the incomplete part of Dayu's territory would be unified with Lingnan Road. It goes without saying how tempting it is for a king to expand the territory. Song Ji might even give Prince Su the 9 gifts. But now is obviously not the time to break through the pass. Su Buling had just killed the emperor, and Prince Su got the news and led his troops out of Qinzhou. Why didn't his mother come to attack Chang'an to save her son? The crime of regicide must be the execution of the whole family, and his son is dead. Prince Su is mentally ill, so he didn't guard against the court at all, and foolishly went to attack northern Qi. What on earth is he thinking? Why would he do such a thing to sacrifice his whole family for the country? The ministers made a lot of noise for a while, and then fell silent. They still didn't believe that Prince Su would go back to attack Yuanzhou. There was no motive, no reason, why. Kui Huelu was stunned for a moment, then looked at the postman. Does Prince Su have a letter? The postman quickly opened the paper tube and took out the roll of paper inside. Song Ji put his hands behind his back, clenched his fists tightly, and said in a deep voice. Read it. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 296. Promise. The messenger quickly opened the rice paper, glanced at the writing on it, and said loudly. Alas! The guilty minister was training troops in Qinzhou recently, and suddenly he received a report from a scout that the troops on the south side of the territory under the jurisdiction of Prince Zhou of the northern Qi dynasty were empty, so he made a plan with his staff to use the power from Qingshui to attack the South Pass. It was a good opportunity that never happened before, and it was an opportunity that must not be missed. I did not ask the Holy One for instructions on how to use the army, but I still hoped that the Holy One would atone for my sins. The criminal minister led an army of 80,000 to attack Nangguan. On the way to the march, he suddenly heard that the rebellious son had deceived the emperor and made a mistake that could lead to the death of the 9 tribes. The guilty minister should have taken off his python robe and golden crown and rushed to the capital to be executed with 1,000 swords. However, a God-given opportunity was ahead of him. As soon as Yuan Zhou was defeated, our Dayu dynasty unified the northwest. We could not delay the fighter plane, so we could only force the march to continue to attack the south. Close. Now that Wangnan Pass has been broken, the guilty minister has fulfilled his father's last wish and has no shame to live in this world. He immediately withdrew his troops and set off to Chang'an to accept his punishment. 3 generations of Su family loyalists have been loyal to the Song family for 60 years. They never thought that they would be framed by bad guys and commit a major crime that implicated the 9 clans. It's a done deal. I just asked the Holy One to remember the old feelings and bury my grandfather and grandson together in one grave. They will stand at Jianyang Pass and continue to defend the country for Dayu. Yours sincerely, the sinner Suyu. After the messenger finished speaking, he looked at the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty. The civil and military officials and Song Ji pondered for a moment, but before they could recover, Xiao Chuang became anxious, raised his hand and said angrily. Nonsense, Wang Nangguan has been defeated. Northern Qi's troops are empty and they won't attack Yuan Zhou. They will withdraw their troops and die wherever they go. Hurry up and send a message to King Su. You must hold Wang Nangguan. The courtiers also reacted, and they suddenly became anxious, and there was a lot of noise. That's right. After 60 years of gnawing, Wangnan Pass was finally broken. Everyone knows that the foreign emperor's order will be ignored. Why withdraw the troops at this time? Keep fighting. Who wants to kill the 3 of you, your grandfather and your grandson, and bury them together in the same grave? What such ugly words! The Holy One has pardoned Su Buling. He said that he was framed by a gangster. Why are you so upright? The ministers discussed anxiously for a moment, and then looked at Emperor Dayu above. However, at this time, most of the courtiers' expressions were a little strange and hesitant to speak. Just now, Song Ji had already guessed that Song Ji had laid out a plan for Yun, waiting for King Su's lineage to jump in. This was originally a magical move. It could cut off the feudal vassal and take back Qinzhou and Weizhou without forcing King Su to rebel. It could also show the magnanimity of a wise lord and even make King Su burst into tears of gratitude. Yes. But now that King Su has not rebelled, he is stupid enough to take advantage of northern Qi's empty troops to attack Wangnan Pass. After learning that his son is determined to kill the emperor, he is ready to kill everyone in his family, and he will also attack Wangnan Pass. What is the pillar of the country? This is called the pillar of the country. Just now, Song Ji was talking about King Su's loyalty, treating him as a brother and always trusting King Su. Now it's fine. King Su has lived up to the trust of His Majesty and is truly loyal. It was wrong to lead troops out of Qinzhou, but it was just an excuse. In order to prevent the fighter planes from leaking out and arresting the scouts, they did not ask for instructions in advance. This is reasonable and reasonable. Moreover, Wangnan Pass has also been defeated. He has just made an immortal contribution. Why are you doing this? Is it a trivial matter that makes someone lose his vassal status? At this time, even if King Su agrees to reduce the vassal status, can Ziliang's 200,000 soldiers who have just made meritorious deeds agree? Doesn't this force King Su to wear a yellow robe? Look at the heroic words in King Su's letter: the crime of rebelling against one's son is worthy of death. The three of us, ancestors and grandson, are buried together in the same grave, standing at Qianyang Pass, and continue to defend the country for Daewoo. Now Su Buletinling is just putting his head here for you to chop off. Can you give it a try? In the past, Su Buletin ordered regicide, and King Su rescued his son and attacked Chang'an, which was rebellion. The teacher was unknown and would definitely not succeed. Now Su Buling was deceived, and the emperor personally redressed his grievances. King Su used the road to march, and Zhongli made great achievements here. If the emperor changes hands and kills his son without any reason, and then cuts down the vassal, do you think the soldiers on the frontier will agree to it, and will the people of the world accept it? This means that the emperor is ignorant and has a good reputation, so he can carry out the suppression of the king openly and honestly. With the Su family's reputation as a loyal family and Su Lai's remaining power, do you think it can become popular? At this point, all the civil and military officials knew that King Su suddenly had such a powerful knife. It was no longer possible for Songji to cut off the vassal, and it was impossible to cut him off with all his strength. What we should be thinking about now is not how to punish, but how to reward, so as not to chill the soldiers. The layout is full, and only half a piece is needed to win or lose. If you lose, you lose. There was silence in the Golden Palace. All of them lowered their heads and faced Songji, waiting for the emperor's reply. Kui Huelu looked ugly and wanted to find some faults with King Su, but he couldn't speak at this time. The Kui family and Songji have been planning for many years. They started planning after discovering that Songyu had the intention to usurp the throne. In order to use this strategy to reduce the power of Su, Lu, Han, Xiao, Lu, and other clans in one fell swoop, the core of the layout was it means Su Buletinling. Ding, Songji's deceased scholar, never betrayed Songji from beginning to end. After stealing the dragon locking goo from the inner treasury and giving it to King Yan Songyu, he watched Songyu's every move. Songyu was also successful, and successfully pushed Su Buling into a desperate situation, and also set his sights on Songji. It's a pity that Songyu missed Su Buling's loyalty and beat him half to death in Tai Chi Hall. Fortunately, in order to be prepared, Songji used his strong national power to find the antidote to the dragon locking goo during the 6 years he had obtained it, and gave Su Buling a jar of antidote wine before letting Su Buling continue to be a pawn. On the Wangjiang platform, Songji just sent a substitute out, wearing a human skin mask as a target. Otherwise, how could Yi Su Buletinling kill Emperor Daewoo in public? This was originally a win-win situation, but King Su couldn't hold himself back. As long as he led his army out of Qinzhou, he would be slaughtered. It was a good thing that Xiao Chuang suddenly turned into a minister to protect the prince, but he couldn't really hurt the Xiao family in the first place. But Songji and the Kui family never expected that Su Wangsuyu would suddenly become a loyal martyr who said, "If you let your ministers die, they must die." It was originally a good situation to put the opponent to death, but because King Su lost his mind and ran to attack Yuanzhou, he was killed by the opponent in an instant. Although removing the Lu and Han families does not mean that everything is lost, the Su family will definitely be unable to move. However, Su Buling had already been infected by the locking dragon goo not long ago. Originally, Songji wanted to cut down the vassal and take out the antidote to keep Su Buling alive, but now he definitely won't take care of it. Songji put his hands behind his back, his face remained calm, but his fists were tightly clenched behind his back. He was silent for a moment, and then whispered, "Prince Su really did not disappoint me. Su Buling was framed by King Yan and should not have been punished. King Su was very loyal, and it was a great achievement to use the road to march through Wangnan Pass, and he should not let his heroes suffer any more mistreatment. I am very relieved that King Su has this intention. It's just that Su Buling has been infected with the dragon Lokgu, and there is no cure. I'm afraid he won't have much time left. Send Su Buling back to the fiefdom today so that his father and son can be reunited. King Su was ordered to continue attacking Yuanzhou. If he could capture the city of Yuanzhou, the territory west of Longde would be given to King Su as a reward. The Holy One is wise. The courtiers were relieved to hear this. It would be fine if Songji Taozi surrendered, but if he wanted to forcefully cut down the vassal, something would happen. As for the reward, King Su had nothing to give him, except territory. The 12 states in the fiefdom are already terrifyingly large, and adding half a state to them will make no difference. It is better than chilling the hearts of the soldiers. It was a top priority to return Su Buling, the unfortunate child, to the fiefdom. Now Su Buling has gone crazy and has been infected by the incurable dragon-locking poison. If he really dies in Chang'an, it will be difficult for the emperor to explain. After a brief discussion, the officials had no objections. Songji took a deep breath, glanced to the northwest, and finally said in a deep voice with some reluctance, "Retreat." The loud voice could be heard far outside the palace. All civil and military officials were shocked and trembled. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 297. 5 days later, Chenkang. The banks of the Wei River were full of greenery. Occasionally, soldiers and horses rushing to Yuanzhou ran by on the official road. When they saw the flag in front of them, they quickly dismounted and stood by the road, with their hands hanging down. The same was true in the towns and villages on the roadside. Many children stood by the official road and looked at the team they had seen a few years ago, slowly passing through the towering walls of Qianyang Pass. The black-armored soldiers walked in front with their heads held high and their chests held high, leading the way. The black flags in their hands fluttered in the wind, announcing who the master of this team was. King Su. The huge carriage driven by 5 horses passed through the wide official road under the scorching sun. 300 cavalrymen guarded the surrounding area, holding their long swords in their hands, solemn and silent, and even the horses' hoofs were almost meticulous. Guo Zhongxian, the commander of the Western Army, and countless Western Army soldiers stood on the top of the Xiongguan Pass that they had just obtained, watching the carriage of the princes slowly pass by, their hearts in their throats. As long as the ceremonial guard of Prince Su passed through the gate and was handed over to the Su family army, if he died, he would have nothing to do with the court. If he died before leaving the gate, it would be another storm that was difficult to calm down. Tiger! 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 On the other side of the first pass in the northwest, 3,000 Ziliang cavalrymen rushed from the army, riding war horses, holding long swords in their hands, and their majestic momentum made the court officers and soldiers on the top of the city dare not say a word. Yang Zunyi, the general of the south route, sat on the snow-stepping war horse. After the carriage passed through Qianyang Pass, he held the long spear in his hand horizontally, and the sound of his whirring stopped abruptly. Yang Zunyi drove his horse to the front and said loudly, "Yang Zunyi, the general of the South Route Army, greets the prince." "Greetings to the prince." The whirring sound shook the sky. Su Buling had been tempered in the border army since he was a child and was respected as the little king of hell. His unparalleled killing power like a god of war had long established prestige in the Ziliang army. But at this moment, Su Buling, who was running out of energy, naturally could not show up. Lao Xiao rode his horse to the side of the carriage and raised the cane in his hand. Yang Zunyi turned around immediately and pointed his long spear to the northwest. "Escort the prince back to the city." "Yes." Ta-ta-ta. The sound of horse hooves was like thunder, and 3,000 iron hooves occupied the entire wilderness, galloping towards the northwest, getting farther and farther away from Chang'an. Compared with the majestic northwest scenery outside the carriage, it was much quieter inside the carriage. The huge carriage, like a house, had bead curtains on all sides to block the light. The maids fanned the air outside to dispel the stuffy summer air in the carriage. In the spacious carriage, Su Buling lay on the couch with a towel on his forehead. His face turned from cyan to pale, and he was barely breathing, but his eyes were open, looking at the woman next to him. "Woo woo, we've already left Jianyang Pass, and we'll be back to Suzhou soon, don't be afraid, it's okay." Beside the couch, Madame Lu, wearing a thin white shirt, with her hair casually tied up, sat sideways next to Su Buling, with two dark circles under her eyes full of bloodshot. She had cried until her tears dried up, and held Su Buling's hand tightly, and she had not let go since she saw Su Buling again. On the 8th day of May, Madame Lu just went out of the city with her precious child to relax, but she never thought that from that moment on, the whole world collapsed. Assassination, regicide, forcing the emperor to abdicate, rebellion, Prince Su left Qinzhou, Xiang'er committed suicide. The originally peaceful life was suddenly torn apart by the tsunami-like changes, directly crushing the heart of this weak woman. Su Buling turned into a regicide in a few hours. When I saw him again, he looked like he was dying. My best friend was disheartened by the fratricide in the imperial family. The brief quarrel in the carriage last time turned out to be a farewell. Mrs. Lu didn't know how she survived. She just felt that she was dead these days. The reason she didn't die was because Su Buling was still alive. If she died, Su Buling would have no one to take care of him. No matter what happened, he had to live. It was not until the situation changed later that Su Buling was framed and Prince Su became a meritorious official. Mrs. Lu recovered a little. But what if she recovered? Xiang'er died just like that. Ling'er was already exhausted. Even the imperial doctor said that his pulse was almost unfeeling. It was not a question of whether he could get better, but whether he could survive. Mrs. Lu's world now only has Su Buling. She dares not close her eyes and just stares at him every day, fearing that if she closes her eyes, Su Buling will die. She faints at some point, and then wakes up in panic and continues to stare. The tense heartstrings of the past few days have pushed the weak woman to the limit. Her originally soft cheeks are only haggard, and her lips have lost their color because she doesn't eat or drink. She only forces herself to eat a few bites because she is afraid that she will die first. Ling'er, it's okay, it's definitely okay. The silent chanting has continued for countless times and is continuing. Su Buling lay on the couch, holding Mrs. Lu's hand, his heart aching, but he couldn't get better before he arrived at the fiefdom of King Su, so he could only watch like this. The horses galloped, the sun and the moon moved, and after watching for a long time, a patch of green suddenly appeared outside the window. The branches and leaves of the poplar trees blocked the light, making the carriage a little cooler. Su Buling's eyelashes fluttered a few times, and he said weakly, "Aunt Lu, where are you?" Mrs. Lu, who was in a daze, was shocked, and her eyes suddenly shone with spirit. "Ling'er, you can speak." She hurriedly grabbed Su Buling's hand, and looked around in a panic. Finally, she remembered to look outside the carriage and responded incoherently. "Poplar forest, a lot of poplar trees." Outside the carriage, there was also the sound of Lao Xiao knocking on the carriage with his cane. "Dong dong. Young prince, we're home." Mrs. Lu was a little anxious and wanted to scold Lao Xiao so that he wouldn't disturb Su Buling. But Su Buling, who was just exhausted, breathed a sigh of relief. He turned over, took the spittoon next to him, and vomited out all the medicine in his stomach that was used to block the blood and qi. "Ahem, ba ba ba. Ah dash." Mrs. Lu screamed and hurriedly supported Su Buling, her face anxious and panicked. "Ling'er, what's wrong with you? Someone come, whoa." After Su Buling spit out the medicine, he covered Mrs. Lu's mouth with his hand, picked up the towel that fell to the side and wiped his mouth, revealing a bright smile. "Aunt Lu, I'm fine, I'm just pretending." Mrs. Lu's eyes were wide open, and she looked at Su Buling's face in disbelief, whose face returned to normal in an instant. Tears slowly welled up in her eyes, but she was a little bit unbelieving, afraid that this was a dream. Su Buling had been taken care of by Mrs. Lu these days, so he saw everything, and his heart had melted long ago. After wiping his mouth, he released his hand covering Mrs. Lu, and then he plucked up the courage to come forward and hold the bloodless soft cheek, and sucked hard a few times. Ba ba bo. Mrs. Lu was still stunned on the spot. Su Buling held her face and kissed her several times. Although he only kissed her forehead and cheeks and not her lips, it was more like an intimate gesture, which brought a shock and gradually awakened Mrs. Lu's mind that had been closed for many days. Ah. Mrs. Lu suddenly came back to her senses, as if her soul had returned to her body. Her face flushed in an instant. She raised her hand and slapped Su Buling several times, and kicked him with her feet. She instinctively scolded him with shame and anger. "I am your aunt." After saying that, Mrs. Lu completely came back to her senses. She stared blankly at Su Buling, who was full of energy and dared to bully her aunt. Tears came out again in an instant. She could no longer hold it back and hugged Su Buling, crying wow. Su Buling hugged Mrs. Lu, thought about it, and covered her mouth again. Woo. Mrs. Lu burst into tears. After realizing that Su Buling was really getting better, she patted Su Buling's back with her hands. She had a lot to say, but she couldn't say a word. She just cried. Su Buling hesitated for a while and didn't tell Mrs. Lu the truth directly. After all, Mrs. Lu didn't know anything from the beginning to the end. She would wait a few days until her mood recovered before telling her slowly. Woo. The sobbing continued. Mrs. Lu, who had no strength to begin with, used great strength to hold Su Buling tightly, making Su Buling a little breathless. Su Buling smiled brightly and gently held Mrs. Lu, kissing the dazed Mrs. Lu on the face from time to time. We love you, aunt. Mrs. Lu's words were unclear. In the end, she didn't avoid being angry. Her arms gradually became weak. She just lay on Su Buling's shoulders and whispered faintly. As the sky gradually darkened and the accompanying soldiers set up camp, Madame Lu fell asleep for the first time in so many days instead of fainting. Su Buling gently placed Madame Lu on the couch, thought for a moment, and kissed her face with slightly moving eyelashes before leaving the carriage silently. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 298. The countryside of Qinzhou is not as prosperous and beautiful as Chang'an. The plains under the Sea of Stars are dotted with fire. Soldiers who have traveled long distances gather around a campfire to eat and chat. 3,000 cavalry form a huge circle, leaving a large space in the middle. Hollow area, so as not to disturb the young prince's recuperation. As the future owner of this world, the courtesy he received was naturally much higher than that of Chang'an City, where princes traveled everywhere. The magistrates and squires of Qinzhou had already been waiting outside the city to greet them, but the Ziliang army never disturbed the people and did not enter the city. Just stationed outside the city. Su Buling's honor guard team naturally had more than one carriage. In addition to his betting carriage, there were more than 40 carriages in the rear. Only one contained Su Buling's things, and the rest belonged to Mrs. Lu. Almost the entire Jinghua garden was emptied, as if they had to take care of Su Buling. Bulletin Ling's appearance for the rest of his life, and various items given to King Su by the imperial court. There were more than 200 people including maids, coachmen, guards, etc., and at dusk they were all resting on the carriage or setting up tents on the spot. Under the bright moonlight, there was a relatively large carriage in the center of the motorcade. It was similar to other carriages filled with clothes and jewelry. The doors and windows were locked. The moon slave was guarding it, and several other carriages blocked it from being seen. Yunu was originally MRS Lu's maid, but Su Buling couldn't be disturbed and stayed at the back of the motorcade, so she was assigned a new job by Lao Xiao to take care of special guests. At this time, Yunu's expression was still weird, and he was a little scared. He looked around for fear that someone would discover the carriage. When he heard the woo sound inside, he didn't answer, but just trembled slightly. It was late at night, and the camp was completely silent. Yunu was seriously guarding outside the carriage when she was suddenly tapped on the shoulder. She was so shocked that she quickly turned her head, only to see Su Buling appear behind her at some unknown time and make a SHH gesture. Little Prince. Yunu felt relieved and did not bother to ask why Su Buling suddenly got better. He ran away in a hurry for fear of being discovered. Su Buling shook his head and chuckled, jumped on the carriage, unlocked it, and entered the carriage. There were no lights in the large carriage, so candles were lit, and only then could one see two graceful women lying in the carriage with their hands and feet tied, their eyes covered with black cloth, twisting around on the blanket. Hearing the sound of someone coming in, the maid among them shivered and looked towards her master to move closer. The master was obviously a little angry, and said woo woo twice, as if he was cursing. Su Buling closed the door of the carriage, walked forward and raised his hand to take off the black cloth covering his eyes, revealing his beautiful cheeks. Her eyebrows were like almonds, and her charm was quite attractive, but her expression was very fierce. Woo! Xiao Xiang stuffed a handkerchief in her mouth and stared at the young man in white, wishing she could bite this bastard to death right now. The last time she went to the summer resort according to Su Buling's advice, she fainted inexplicably just after waiting for 2 days, and then appeared in a small courtyard dozens of miles away from Chang'an City. The door was locked and deserted. She thought she was being kidnapped. Fortunately, Lao Xiao came out once and said it was Su Buling's arrangement, so that she could calm down. Xiao Xiang didn't know martial arts and couldn't fly out of the yard, so she just waited calmly. Unexpectedly, within a few days, she fainted again and was tied to the carriage. It was a bit hot in the summer, and she had never suffered this kind of pain since she was a child. She was stuffed with a handkerchief and couldn't scream. She could only wait in the dark carriage with Jiao Yi, who depended on each other. The carriage was swaying, and I didn't know where I was going. Anyway, I walked for a while. Only every night could a woman untie her hands and feet, pull her around, and then be put into the car again. She knew that the woman was MRS Lu's maid, Yu Inu, so she was quite obedient. She just kept complaining about Su Buling and Lu Hongluan. Now that she saw Su Buling again, Xiao Xiang who had been holding it in for many days, couldn't bear it any longer. She twisted around with majestic and angry eyes. Woo dash. Be good, baby. Su Buling said softly and calmly, and raised his hands to untie his hands and feet. Xiao Xiang was stunned for a moment, then with anxious eyes, she motioned to Jiao Yi next to her. Jiao Yi obviously heard it and froze on the spot in shock. After Su Buling untied the rope, he went to untie Jiao Yi. Xiao Xiang took out the handkerchief from her mouth, stood up hurriedly, and kicked Su Buling's legs a few times with her embroidered shoe. Su Buletinling, how brave are you to kidnap me? After Jiao Yi was untied, she already noticed something was wrong. She kept her head down and walked to the corner of the carriage to face the wall. With a smile on his face, Su Buling raised his hand and pulled the dignified Xiao Xiang over and held him in his arms, saying softly, "Baby, guess where this is?" Xiao Xiang's eyes were full of fear and astonishment, and she anxiously motioned to Jiao Yi next to her. Unexpectedly, just after winking twice, Su Buling blocked her mouth, pushed her down on the couch, and raised her hands to untie her skirt. Xiao Xiang was so frightened that she was hurriedly pushing and pushing, trying to stop Su Buling's insane evil deeds. Jiao Yi was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Seeing the Queen Mother being kissed by a man, as a maid who had grown up with her since childhood, she still mustered up the courage to run over and pull Su Buling. "Young prince, shut up, you are crazy. If someone finds out." After Su Buling kissed her for a while, he let go of Xiao Xiang'er, who had eyes full of pleading, and raised his hand to help her up, still holding her in his arms. "From now on we can detoxify openly." "Bah, are you crazy today?" Xiao Xiang'er acted like a queen mother, struggled hard, and wanted to call someone, but she didn't dare. She didn't even dare to make eye contact with Jiao Yi. She just winked at Su Buling anxiously. Su Buling raised his hand and opened the car window with a slight smile. "Look outside." Xiao Xiang'er was angry and anxious. She glanced outside and saw the dark wilderness, and said angrily, "Where is this? What do you want to do?" I. Su Buling sighed and hugged the restless baby. "This is Kinzhou, my territory." Xiao Xiang'er was stunned, and after looking carefully for a few times, he saw countless Ziliang soldiers and horses in the distance. His eyes were suddenly stunned. How did you come to Kinzhou? How did you leave Chang'an?" With a smile on his face, Su Buling told Song Jibu's plan and results. Xiao Xiang'er frowned and listened. Halfway through, his eyes were filled with shock, and he frowned and said angrily, "You took too many risks and took advantage of the situation. What if the Holy One is really innocent and you killed the wrong person?" Su Buling shook his head and smiled. "The layout for me will not be just to kill me. The ultimate goal must be to reduce the vassal state. And the biggest beneficiary of reducing the vassal state must be the emperor. I would directly drive out the Su family and kill them all. My father would not kill him at the slightest opportunity. The consequences of rebellion would be unbearable for the court, so he would not be so impatient. Therefore, I speculated that they should use me to force my father to send troops to deal with the situation first, and then force my father to withdraw his troops to achieve the purpose of reducing the vassal state. I received a jar of detoxification wine that could detoxify 20% of the poison, which also confirmed this guess. The mastermind behind the scenes can save my life at any time, because if I am really dead, there will be no room for negotiation. Then based on this, we can infer people who can use this method. If you lead me to the palace, you must let me kill the emperor. Then the person who planned it must be someone who wants to be the emperor, or someone who supports others to become the emperor. But even if the new king succeeds in usurping the throne, this method can make my father retreat his troops, but I will kill the king without dying. Being impatient leaves many hidden dangers. Then I thought about it further. Under what circumstances, I can make perfect use of this situation to achieve the purpose of reducing the vassal, and convince the court, my father, and the people of the world. It turns out that only the emperor's resurrection from the dead can perfectly solve the problem of I can't kill the king. And Zhang Xiang's confession made me know that the emperor and locking dragon goo are inseparable. I don't believe that the emperor didn't know about Song Yu's various tricks. There must be two people behind the scenes, so they pulled the strings. Xiao Xiang'er's eyes were full of disbelief. Just because you guessed that there were two people behind the scenes, you killed the emperor? If you kill by mistake. Su Buling chuckled. If the wrong person Song Yu is killed and he succeeds to the throne, in order to calm down the mood of the courtiers, Song Yu will definitely plant the dragon lock goo on the emperor's head, explain my last resort, and then force my father to retreat on the grounds of my life. In order to break the situation, I asked my father to lead troops out of Kinzhou to act like a rebel, and then march directly to Yuanzhou, catching the northern Qi dynasty who was watching from the other side unprepared. As long as my father does not rebel, it will be difficult for me to die as my life is short and I have no choice but to die. Even if Song Yu or Song Ji don't even want to take the merits they have obtained, and risk forcing me to rebel against my father, I will be able to escape from Chang'an alone if a large part of my poison has been cured. Of course, all this is thanks to the baby. If you hadn't helped me detoxify, I wouldn't have dared to take such a risk. Xiao Xiang'er stared at her eyes and thought carefully for a moment. Her mind was still a little confused, and finally she said coldly. If you break the situation, break the situation. Why did you tie me here? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 299. In the quiet carriage, the talented man and the beautiful woman sat hugging each other. Su Buling blinked, raised his hand and patted Xiao Xiang'er's buttocks. The Queen Mother has committed suicide in the summer resort, and there is no Queen Mother in the world. You will be my woman from now on, forbidden. Puh. Xiao Xiang'er was extremely shocked by the news. After seeing that Su Buling was not telling lies, she became confused and struggled to get up. You are talking nonsense. I am obviously not dead. I, the Queen Mother, have done a good job. You, let me go. I want to return to the capital. Su Buling slowly took off her skirt. Baby, the Queen Mother is dead. A funeral is probably being held in Chang'an City. There is no Queen Mother in the world anymore. You can't go back. Xiao Xiang'er's almond-shaped eyes widened, her mind was in a mess, she stared at Su Buling and spoke incoherently. You are so presumptuous. I am the Queen Mother. I will detoxify you before I sacrifice myself. I will kill myself after detoxifying. It will do nothing to you. How could you think so beautifully? I will not go back to Suzhou with you, you let go drive me. Su Buring pursed his lips and chuckled, unbuttoned his red dress, and held the Queen Mother in his arms. You will commit suicide after the poison has been detoxified. The poison has not been detoxified yet. There are still 79 times to go. The work needs to be completed. Xiao Xiang'er struggled hard, with annoyance and an unyielding look in his eyes, but the look in his eyes gradually softened as he refused to obey his orders, and even had a faint eagerness to break free from the prison. The Queen Mother is dead, and there is no Queen Mother in the world. She is Xiao Xiang'er, a free woman who doesn't have to worry about etiquette, rules, responsibilities, and other shackles. She is who she is, she can like whoever she wants to like, and can go wherever she wants to go. All of this is too tempting for a woman who has been alone in the palace for 10 years. Xiao Xiang'er kept scolding, but her body gradually became weak. Sitting in Su Buling's arms, the indescribable but familiar feeling appeared in her heart again. Her mind collapsed in an instant, and she could no longer think about anything. He just instinctively raised his hand to tell Chiao Yi to go out without looking. Chiao Yi's face turned purple and she didn't dare to look at Su Buling and Miss Su's current appearance. She ran out of the carriage to look out for the wind as if she was running for her life. The moon is bright and the stars are sparse, and the earth is clear and bright. In the small carriage, the sound of breathing rose and fell. Su Buling faced the direction of Chang'an, held the Queen Mother in his arms, pondered for a while, and said softly, "Baby, let me tell you something, don't be angry." Xiao Xiang'er, who had been willing to die just now, had already softened into a puddle of mud. She rested her chin on Su Buring's shoulder in a daze, and murmured with a hint of resentment, Su Buling pursed his lips and chuckled, took a breath, put one arm around the Queen Mother's waist, raised his right hand, and raised his middle finger to Chang'an. "The dog emperor, my mother-in-law." Snap. A loud slap appeared in the carriage, and a shameful and angry woman scolded. "Bah, you are sick, get out of here. Baby, don't be angry." Under the same moonlight, the thousands of streets and squares in Chang'an City have returned to their former peace with the departure of Prince Su. Prince Su and Guo Zongxian's capture of the city in Yuanzhou has made the literati even more enthusiastic. The earth-shattering changes in the past few days have made the city more peaceful. It was deliberately forgotten and kept secret in the back of my mind. Changal Palace, which used to be cold, became even colder with the passing of the Queen Mother. Not many people in this world know that the Queen Mother is still alive, because the Queen Mother has always been an outsider. She has been in contact with Su Buling a few times, and she just moved around normally. No one would have thought that the locking dragon goo would have such a weird solution. Su Buling, if you can be so bold, the Queen Mother will be so bold. A fire broke out in the summer resort, coinciding with the coup in the Tai Chi Palace. The imperial guards, officers, and soldiers stayed silent near Chang'an to prevent any unexpected events, and they did not even have time to rescue. The weather was dry in summer, and a sudden fire almost destroyed the entire summer resort. No one cared about the Queen Mother, just like no one remembered that there was such a useless Queen Mother in the palace before. The only ones who still miss the Queen Mother and feel sad for her are the Xiao family members. Xiao Qi, the eldest daughter of the Xiao family, as the Queen Mother's sister, naturally cried the hardest and almost fainted from crying. However, with Xiao Qi's intelligence, she actually guessed that there would be changes in her sister who suddenly left the city when the Wang Jiangtai incident happened. Therefore, Xiao Qi never believed that her sister would die from the beginning to the end. She must have been taken away by the treacherous face of death. For this reason, after hearing the news that the Queen Mother had committed suicide, Xiao Qi was the first to go to the summer resort. In the name of searching for corpses, she messed up the ruins of the summer resort. She randomly found a few bones and burned them as replacements, and then sealed the bones. After entering the coffin, given the status of the Xiao family, it was naturally not easy for the clan to open the coffin and perform an autopsy. Xiao Qi is actually quite happy about her sister's ending. The Queen Mother is just an identity. Whether she is Xiao Xiang or not, it doesn't matter whether she is dead or alive, as long as her surname is Xiao. My sister can change her name and live in another place for the rest of her life. How can her sister be angry or obstruct her? This is already the best ending. However, Xiao Qi still doesn't believe that the dead man who licked her clean can be so powerful. After this fateful situation was over, Xiao Qi reviewed the results carefully after learning all the results. The three of them played chess. Song Yu used Su Buling as a chess piece to usurp the throne, and Song Ji used Song Yu as a chess piece to cut down the feudal vassal. As the lowest chess piece, Su Buling should have been killed at the first glance. If Su Buling didn't kill the emperor, Song Ji and Song Yu would not let Su Buling leave the capital alive. Su Buling's way out was very simple. He followed the path laid by Song Yu and Song Ji. At the last critical moment, when the whole world thought that Prince Su would rebel and attack Chang'an, Prince Su took his troops and ran to attack northern Qi without caring about his son's life or death. Even the Prince Zhou of northern Qi didn't expect that his old enemy would attack him at this time, not to mention the civil and military officials of Daiyue. In retrospect, taking this step was unexpected but reasonable, and it was almost the simplest and most perfect solution. But it was hard for Xiao Qi to imagine how much courage it took to think about it in advance. After all, Su Buling was dying after being infected with the dragon locking goo. If he failed, he wouldn't even be able to see Prince Su for the last time. Even if he succeeded and returned to Suzhou, he would be a useless person. This was to use his life to exchange for a peaceful life for Prince Su. After Su Buling left, Xiao Qi was about to return to Huainan, but she could not forget the man who had seen through the overall situation and had awakened her so that she could remind Xiao Chuang to take away all the credit of the Kui family. Originally, Xiao Qi wanted Su Buling to die quickly after losing her virginity to Su Buling, but today, she felt that it was a pity that Su Buling became a useless person. If he could live safely, he should be very powerful in the future. Full of thoughts, Xiao Qi came to Changle Palace for the last time and came to the place where she first visited. The bedroom was still full of various objects. The Queen Mother had no children. The Xiao family would come to clean it tomorrow, seal up the Queen Mother's relics, and bring them back to the Xiao family for future generations to mourn. Xiao Qi stood in the huge boudoir, looking at the phoenix bed that no one would lie on again. When she was lost in thought, she remembered the way she was bullied by the evil man. I used to hate it, but now I don't know why I don't hate it that much. After a short silence, Xiao Qi suddenly remembered something, ran to the bed and squatted, touched under the bed, and successfully found a small box. Xiao Qi blushed. She didn't expect her sister didn't even take this away. What if the palace maids found it? I remember there was a wooden man inside. Xiao Qi looked back and saw that there was no one in the bedroom, so she raised her hand to open the wooden box to check, but she didn't expect that the quail eggs and foxtail inside were all gone, only a piece of paper was left. Huh? Xiao Qi blinked, a little confused, picked up the note written by someone unknown, unfolded it and took a look, but saw a few lines of small characters written on the note. 19 lines vertical and horizontal, black and white fell on the jade plate. On the edge of the abyss, relying on the fish leaping, half a move is better than the blue sky. Goodbye, miss. Volume 3, The Dragon Slashing in the Raging Sea. The black blade pressed down the city, the sword was like the sea, and the sword and belt rang to kill the dragon. End. Volume 4, Sword Wielding Across the World. Wearing a sword in white, he travels 100,000 miles, and a single step out of the door is the end of the world. Tentative, the detailed outline has not yet been written. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 300. Winter solstice of the 18th year of Suan He, Chang'an. The whole city was covered in silver, and the fine and dense snow fell in Daifang. The Zhuangyuan street, which was full of people, was full of people. It was also a Zhuangyuan street, but it was not full of talented men and beautiful women decades later. Instead, it was full of swordsmen, and famous women. Longjian Pavilion was not a place for poetry gatherings, but a place for the entire Northwest to become famous. The arena between the 5 floors had seen countless new heroes stand up and countless old giants fall. At this time, the detective department was still a small government office under the lieutenant's mansion, and there was no sign of the Black Wolf Guards who would shock the world in the future. Lu Yunlin, who had just been transferred to the capital for development because of his relationship with the Guanzhonglu family, was still a small constable hiding in the street corners and looking around. He had to bow and scrape when he met a more powerful hero. In the early morning of the winter solstice, outside Yingchun Tower, 3 handsome young men walked onto the street with the respectful farewell of the old procuress. Among them, Suyu, who had a pair of peach blossom eyes, rummaged through his crotch and found a white horse running by the street. On the horse sat a white-clothed chivalrous lady with a long sword hanging from her waist. He immediately pretended to be gentle and elegant and composed a poem. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 or 4 pieces, 5 pieces, 6 pieces, 7 or 8 pieces. But this poem was really hard to hear. Song Yu, who was wearing a scholar's robe behind him, shook his head helplessly. Suyu, this is not called poetry, it's not as good as my brother's. Song Ji next to him was just in his early 20s, but he already looked mature. He waved his hand gently. I have not been good at this since I was a child. Suyu is better than me. That's right. Suyu was full of pride and recited the poem seriously. It was a pity that the white-clothed chivalrous lady on the horse not only did not promise to marry him, but also cursed him as a lecher. Suyu, who had just come out of the brothel, was immediately annoyed and pointed. Look, these women in the martial arts world are so rude. Songji looked at the unkempt and unkempt martial artists on the street. The martial arts world is like this, lawless, and the use of force to break the law has been repeatedly banned. My father and I have repeatedly advised against it, but there is no response. Suyu kept his eyes on the white-clothed female knight. It's better than a scholar. Look at Song Yu, who was so shy when visiting a brothel. He wanted to touch but didn't dare to touch, and wanted to sleep but was afraid of offending the beauty. Suyu, you. Song Yu's face flushed immediately, but he could only say in a literary way. It's insulting. Suyu chuckled, and when he found that the white-clothed female knight turned into the bluestone alley in front, he patted his belly. I didn't drink well last night, let's go. And ran towards the bluestone alley. Song Yu was anxious. Hey. If you don't go back, you will miss the morning reading. The teacher will punish you to copy books again. Song Ji was a little helpless, but he didn't say anything. He followed Suyu to the Qingxi alley. There are many people in the Jianghu, so there are naturally many drinkers in Qingxi alley. People from all over the world, carrying a variety of weapons, lined up honestly from the wine shop to the entrance of the alley. The same wine shop, the same strong liquor that burns the throat. The difference is that shopkeeper's son is still a rough man in his 40s, with a towel on his shoulders, and his temper is worse than that of the outside Jianghu people. Situ, you are so great. I have seen the sword saint. One tael of silver and a pot of wine are unshakable. The middle-aged man with the 9-ring knife rolled up his sleeves and started to say nice things. You came all the way here, it's not like I won't give you silver, give me 2 more pots to drink on the way. You can't drink on the way, just 1 pot, so many people are waiting. Hey. You. Noisy and noisy. The woman in white with a veil hat was a little bored while leading the horse in line, so she stood in front of a painting stall in the alley and admired the calligraphy and paintings hanging on the wall. The painting seller was a scholar with an elegant face and shabby clothes. His robe was washed white, but still very neat. However, the calligraphy and paintings written by the scholar were not particularly outstanding, not to mention that there were only barbarians wandering around here, and only a few knights from aristocratic families would take a look. The shabby scholar was quite eloquent, and kept saying good things to the white-clothed chivalrous woman, trying to persuade her to buy a few paintings to hang on the wall as decorations. Unfortunately, before they could say a few words, 3 playboys came over and forced their way behind the chivalrous woman, and started to chat with her, calling her girl, young man. The white-clothed chivalrous woman was a little annoyed, so she led her horse and left, and the 3 playboys chased after her, and the business was gone. The shabby scholar had experienced this many times, and he didn't take it seriously, so he grabbed another chivalrous woman and said good things to her. The chivalrous lady was very tall as the scholar, and she had no intention of buying anything. However, there was no playboy to bother her, and the scholar was too annoying. He walked from the entrance of the alley to the front of the tavern, and he was so annoying that she had no choice but to throw a silver ingot. While the scholar was looking for the shopkeeper to exchange for change, she took a painting and left. Girl, et. The shabby scholar ran out of the back room of the tavern and saw that there was no one there, and he couldn't help but feel a little confused. Manager's son had a rag on his shoulder and laughed when he saw this. Hans Hung, take the reward money, it's enough for you to live for half a month. The scholar named Hans Hung was immediately dissatisfied when he heard this and waved his hand and said, You charge 1 tael of silver for a pot of wine, which is unshakable. I charge 3 taels of silver for a painting, which is also fair to everyone. If you give too much, it would be like eating wasted food. No, no. You owe the meal money from summer to winter, and you are still so stubborn. If you fail the exam again in spring, you can be my clerk. I don't mind your diligence. Pooh. Han Sheng held the silver coins and looked around in the alley, learn literary and martial arts, and repay the emperor's family, that's what the book says. If I become a clerk, wouldn't the 10 years of hard study be in vain? Shopkeeper's son saw that he couldn't persuade him, so he stopped talking and continued to mess around in his small tavern. Han Sheng held a handful of silver coins and ran back to the tavern, waiting at the entrance of the alley. From the first snow to the first spring, from the white-clothed chivalrous woman beating the dude, to the two of them walking hand in hand through the alley, with the sour little girl following behind. Finally one day, Han Sheng met the chivalrous woman who gave him more silver again. The chivalrous woman almost forgot about Han Sheng, but she remembered him when she saw Han Sheng insisted on giving her silver. After that, the chivalrous woman came every day and bought a painting from the painting stall every day. Han Sheng originally thought that the chivalrous woman liked his paintings, but he understood it after a while. After that, Han Sheng relied on staying in the wine shop to get a pot of wine every day to hide it, so that the chivalrous woman would not line up. Time passed slowly. Han Sheng gradually paid off his debts, and stopped studying hard. Occasionally, he would go to the ferry bridge for a stroll. But after the spring examination, Han Sheng still failed. He was a little discouraged by failing the imperial examination every year, but he did not give up. After all, what else could a poor scholar do besides the imperial examination? But one day, the chivalrous woman suddenly ran over in the middle of the night and knocked on the door of the wine shop. She was injured and said that she was framed and had to leave the capital immediately. She asked him if he wanted to go with her. Han Sheng hesitated at the time, and the chivalrous woman left by herself. Han Sheng finally couldn't help it, put all the money he had saved on the wine table, and chased after her. This chase lasted for many years. He traveled all over Daio mountains and rivers, saw all the beautiful scenery in the world, learned some boxing and kung fu from the chivalrous woman who was already his wife, and gave birth to a daughter. Han Sheng was born in winter, so he was called Han Sheng. His daughter was born at night, when the moon was bright and the stars were sparse, so she was called Qing Ye. The family of 3 lived in Shu. Han Sheng was not good at studying, but he was very talented in martial arts. In just 2 years, he could not beat his wife. But his wife committed a crime and was wanted by the court. Although she was framed, both of them were wandering around and could not get justice. Han Sheng, who had learned martial arts, remembered the old saying, learn civil and martial arts and repay the emperor's family. He thought that if he could not pass the civil exam, he could always pass the martial arts exam, so he prepared to continue to go to Beijing to take the exam and seek an official position. At that time, his wife was hiding in a mountain village in Shu. She was not in a good mood after having a daughter. She said a few words to him and advised him not to be crazy and become a running dog of the court. Han Sheng had read the books of sages since he was a child. He felt that if he had the ability, he would not serve the court. He could not run away to rob houses like the Jianghu people. Because of this incident, the two quarreled for the first time in their lives, and also for the last time. In the end, Han Sheng still took the package and followed his wife's instructions to learn some martial arts in several places, and then came to the capital thousands of miles away to prepare for the martial arts examination. At this time, it was already the first year of Zhaohong. The new emperor came to power and began to purge the bandits in the rivers and lakes, which was also called Iron Eagle hunting deer. The time for the martial arts examination had not arrived yet, and Han Sheng wanted to find a job in the detective department, but unfortunately, before he could find a way, the great purge of the rivers and lakes began. In that catastrophe, it was difficult to count how many people died, and the old generation was almost extinct. The world's rivers and lakes dared not step on Fenglingdu again, and Chang'an City was left with only talented men and beautiful women, and no heroes, and the people of the rivers and lakes were broken. Han Sheng was worried about the safety of his wife and daughter, and ran back as fast as he could, but unfortunately, he didn't catch up after all. When Han Sheng returned to the mountain village where he was hiding, there was only a ruin in front of him. The thatched house built by the two people was burned to ashes, leaving nothing behind. His wife's body was buried by his friends in the nearby mountains, and his daughter was sent to Wudaing by his friends to seek protection from the masters. As a husband, he did nothing from beginning to end. Han Shen knelt on the ruins for 3 days and 3 nights, wailing, suffering, apologizing, and regretting. But his wife was dead. Even if he blamed himself and regretted it, he could no longer see the smile that had reached out to him in the Bluestone Alley. Han Sheng paid off the debt of the wine shop with the money his wife used to buy paintings, and taught him good martial arts with his wife's words and deeds. She also gave him a daughter and a home. But until this time, Han Sheng realized that these things were far more important than the phrase learning literary and martial arts and repaying the emperor's family. Han Sheng is a scholar in his bones. Everything is inferior except reading. Even though he is a rare master in the world, he is unwilling to hit people. He wants to reason with people, seek an official position to benefit the people, and return home in glory wearing an official robe one day. Han Sheng did nothing wrong. The book said, learn literary and martial arts, and repay the emperor's family. But why didn't the emperor's family want him, and caused his family to be broken up and his wife and children to be separated? He became a heartless and ungrateful person? The book can't be wrong, then only people are wrong, that emperor is wrong. Under the heavy rain, in front of the ruins, Han Shen knelt on the ground, from howling to silence, and from silence to resentment, vowing to burn all the resentment in the world. Since then, Han Sheng has never been to Shu again, and dared not to look at his wife's grave, nor dared to look at his daughter. But since then, there has been a name in the world. Poison Scholar Li Han Sheng. A name that is still ranked first among the 4 heroes in the case library, a name that makes the wolf guards tremble with fear. Once you enter the martial arts world, there is no turning back. Old shopkeeper's son often said this. But this sentence does not mean that Han Sheng should not enter the world of martial arts, but that Han Sheng should not look back. In the early morning of summer, smoke rose from the village in the deep mountains. In the woods at the entrance of the village, a big white goose chased a few hens and ran around, and a big yellow dog with a rope around its neck lay shivering under the stone chessboard. Song Yufu, who was dressed like a village girl in an emerald skirt, had a wine gourd hanging around her waist and sat on a stone bench in a proper manner. She was picking and choosing with a winnowing basket filled with brown rice on her legs. Opposite the chessboard carved out of a large stone, the white-haired old man, holding a purple clay teapot in his hand, looked at the chessboard in front of him and told a story seriously. Song Yufu listened absent-mindedly. She looked at the big white goose that was bullying the hens everywhere, and after a fierce roar, she turned her head. "Grandpa, how is that Hans hung now?" The old man shook his head. "He is stubborn." Grandpa always spoke in a mysterious way, and Song Yufu didn't understand, so she didn't ask. Seeing Grandpa collecting chess pieces one by one and throwing them into the bamboo chess basket, Song Yufu pursed her lips. "Why don't you play anymore?" The old man put the black and white pieces into the chess basket separately, and smiled kindly. "After a game of chess is finished, it will naturally stop. You have to play a new game." Song Yufu looked at the game of chess that had been played since she came, and felt a little puzzled. She is good at playing the piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and can clearly see that Grandpa didn't play chess at all. He just put the chess pieces in positions and moved them around. There is no regret in playing Go. How can you move them? Song Yufu also asked when she first came, but unfortunately Grandpa was like an old immortal and said, "Don't ask if you don't understand." She had no choice but to stop asking. Seeing that the game was over, she said, "Did the black piece win or the white piece win?" The old man thought carefully. "The chess piece won." Song Yufu pursed her lips. If it weren't for her grandfather's terrible reputation, she would have thought he was mentally ill. After the old master put away the chess pieces, he picked up another black piece and placed it on Zhong Yuan, and said softly, "Yufu, you said you liked that guy called Buling. Su Buling, I don't like him, I lied to Grandpa. Song Yufo hesitated, turned her back, and continued to bully the big white goose. Bai Shizi, if you bully the hen again, I will beat you. The big white goose quacked twice, with a cold and arrogant look, just like Su Buling, who deserved a beating. Song Yufo was angry, picked up a small branch from the side, and was about to go up and beat the prince. The old man took a sip of tea and shook his head. Write a letter to that Ling and ask him to come to Yuelu Mountain. You owe me a favor and you have to pay it back. Song Yufo was stunned, then blushed a little and sat down properly. Why should I write to him? We are not familiar with each other, and the prince doesn't owe me a favor. The old man snorted lightly. It doesn't matter if you don't write it. Anyway, you will get married when you return to the capital in 2 years. Song Yufo pursed her lips, looking reluctant. I just owe him a favor. He's a wine gourd, we have to give it back to him. Where is your mother's hairpin? Oh Grandpa. He. Seeing that Grandpa was silent, Song Yufo's face recovered a little, and she lowered her head to continue washing rice. After thinking for a while, she changed the subject and said, Grandpa, how come you seem to know everything? The old man chuckled, with many informants, you naturally know a lot. Song Yufo said oh, then got up and trotted back to the primary school in the village, and buried her head in writing a letter.